We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Maria Neve. She's the Senior Vice President of People Experiences for the Americas for Sony Music Entertainment. Maria, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger? Do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you so much, Christina, for that warm welcome. And I'm excited to be here with you and have this conversation today, firstly, and most importantly. A little bit about me. Yes, I am a second-generation immigrant born in the UK. If for those of you listening and hearing my accent, now living in New York, land of the Maasai Lenape people. I'm cis-het and go by the pronouns she and her. And yes, I currently have the privilege to work for Sony Music Entertainment and as the SVP People Experience. I'm also a certified professional coactive coach and a member of the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, and the creator of Fearless She, which is a collective community committed to the advancement of women of all identities. So that's where I am now. And back to the question around what did I want to be when I grew up? Honestly, I didn't really know. It would change from one day to the next. So one day it was a dancer. The next day I wanted to be a singer, loved music, a defense lawyer, and a writer. They were the ones that kept popping up. I don't know what that all means, but they were the ones. All I knew that was in some way I wanted to have some impact in the world. And I remember the Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world, is something that stuck with me from very young. So they're the things that stood out to me when I was younger.
I love that. I always think it's fun to reflect back and see, where did we think we'd be 20, 10 years from now as well. Fast forward to today, you're definitely making a change, having an impact on people's lives as well in terms of people experience, and appreciate you sharing a little bit about your journey to this work as well. And we know that especially in terms of people experiences and when we're talking about workplace, the language that we use is important and defining what we mean by that. So I want to kick it off with kind of a broad question around how do you really define employee experience at Sony Music Entertainment?
It's a great question. And I think probably one that is ever evolving. So, how we define it right now is really from a high level, making sure that we're supporting all segments of that employee journey by really enabling our people, building the right capabilities and cultivating our unique culture. That's really our kind of high level, but what does that really mean? So it's everything from the moment you really connect with us online or at a conference or a college, through that joining and integration and inclusion experience, through your career journey. So it's like the small moments and the big moments of your career are all about the experience, from the little things and how you engage with us, as I said, online or live experiences as well. I think it's redesigning the small things like the way we onboard to much more of a hybrid approach, yet really redesigning all of the experiences with much more of a human-centered and inclusive approach, and in using the experience design thinking model, which is really about putting the user at the center of the experience. And I think one thing that I know that, and many folks in this space know, and the more research we read and see about it, but just from our own listening to employees, is that practices related to trust, transparency, inclusion, and really that empathy and care have a real disproportionate impact on the employee experience. So, every employee wants to feel unique, and this focus on that uniqueness is really where we are starting to design our experiences that really honor that and create a sense of inclusion, belonging, and respect. So that's what it is for us. So it's many things, it's layered, and it's an ongoing, evolving journey.
I think that trust is so important that you're talking about, that sense of belonging. And when we're building those one-on-one relationships, employee to company relationships, they definitely don't happen overnight. It's something that you need to continuously cultivate and really think intentionally about as well. You mentioned redesigning, and I think iteration, trial and error, just getting that feedback is so important, especially to this work too. As new team members are joining, people are reaching their 5-10 year anniversaries at a company as well. And since the pandemic started, a lot of leaders and folks have really leaned into creativity and innovation because we've had to all figure this out live as well. Can you tell me a little bit about the unlearning that you kind of think about in terms of how we intentionally really redesign the employee and people experience, if you can provide any examples?
Yeah, happy to. And gosh, so much to unpack there. So I'll keep it as high level as possible, but dive in as much as we can around it. I think there's a lot of unlearning. There's a lot of unlearning around, I think, both the doing, how we show up and what we do, and also how the being part of us, like who we are and how we are. So for me, it's starting with a place of unlearning habits and patterns that are no longer serving us. So a lot has happened in the last 2-3 years. We are not the same folks as we were coming into the pandemic, coming out of it. So many practices and behaviors that once may have worked no longer do. As well as practices that we know actually really never worked, but we just were never maybe brave enough or to face and center and really unpack. Now we're forced to. So I believe that as we start to redesign the employee experience, we have to start with those that lead and create it. And absolutely, it involves everyone, but it really starts with the HR and people teams and leadership collectively together. So for me, it's about doing inside out work. We can't impact and change anything unless we also hold the mirror to ourselves. So how can we systemically change the ways of working and practices unless we look at all of us that are in roles that hold those practices and policies? So there's a lot of unlearning there. And I think a couple to talk through is, we know there's been awakening over the last few years. It's talked about so much. We know it's true. We feel it. I feel it. I'm sure you do, Christina, too, around how important wellness is. And wellness is such a broad term. It means different things to different people, but is it protecting time for self, for my joy, for family, for being able to just switch off when I need to? And how work now aligns to my individual values and purpose is really, really important. And people care about that a lot more now, maybe, than perhaps what they did, or they speak it out more than they did. So how do we switch to, in my doing, to protect wellness? So is that workplaces becoming more flexible to allow people to protect that time? Within the employee experience, how do we honor and create space for that? Flexible working is one thing. Also honoring people's time off when they need to, and spotting the signs when we see people hitting burnout. How do we help enable that? And what wellness practices can we proactively put around the employee experience? So there's some unlearning of what was into designing coactively together with employees what is needed next. And then the other one I'd call out is there's now more of a focus on calling out bias and inequity. It's been here all along, but we're calling it out and maybe seeing it more. And there's a learning and unlearning that comes with that, recognizing that our own practices may be unconsciously inequitable. So how do we redesign with everything, all of our people practices and leadership practices with a lens of equity? How is access enabled? What are opportunities and how are they opened up for folks? And what were different resources and needs? And that means that there's an unlearning of an old leadership model, of the command and control style leadership, of sometimes even how we delegate, and models that we've maybe trained before perhaps are no longer actually needed and healthy today. So bringing more empathy to leadership and inclusivity and agility, they're the new learnings. And then the final unlearning, I think, when it comes to the people experience, is for us right now, and definitely what I'm seeing others focusing on too, is this unlearning around the belief that collaboration only happens in person, and working hard is only there when I can see you. Really unlearning control and learning how to manage folks by goals and impact and measuring results, rather than proximity bias that comes up with just if you're in the office. More empowerment, more accountability. And I think I'd just close this out by my thoughts on this around that this is hard. This is hard. This is unlearning, is hard work, is uncomfortable work. And actually most change often stops because of that very thing, because it's not easy, and we like ease sometimes. So how do we push through the discomfort? And giving ourselves grace during the process, that it's okay if you stop and pause, because this is ongoing unlearning that is needed for us to really make change.
Absolutely. I definitely agree that unlearning can be hard. Holding a mirror up to yourself and asking those questions can be incredibly difficult as well. And I think that a lot of leaders are really thinking about how do we proactively get ahead of, as you were talking about burnout, how do we think about wellness, really defining these terms, having these renewed values and kind of social contracts at work. And I think it's one thing to really think about it, do the internal work, ask the question, say, this is my intention, and then we all take cues. It's everyone's responsibility to create company culture, but I think we do take special cues and models from leaders, executives, and people managers as well. We know the role of leaders and those people managers has significantly changed. So I want to ask you, how do you kind of encourage those leaders and managers, and really anyone who's in that formal or informal leadership capacity, to lead with those key areas of empathy and vulnerability?
Great question. I love all of what you shared there. It's so true, Christina. And we know behavior breeds behavior. So you're right. Change starts at the top as well. Leaders demonstrating the behaviors we need to see that shift. So I think it also comes in terms of how do we encourage it. I think as people partners or people that are in the people business and partnering with leaders and trying to hold and help support their journey shift and change is about demonstrating it ourselves. So I'd say demonstrate it and meet people where they are. So how do we, if we're asking for empathy and vulnerability from our leaders and to lead with that more human approach, then how do we show up in that way first with them? Right now, even the best leaders need to learn new approaches and need to unlearn some things, as we just talked about. So we forget sometimes that leaders are human too. They are as flawed and fabulous as the rest of us. So connecting to them as humans with fears and pressures and truly listening. So I think a lot of listening first around what's really going on with them is the foundation to helping encouraging them to show up differently. So understand what's really going on. Then it's about understanding also what they care about. What is it that drives them? So is it some people are really driven by team impact? So leave it there. Some people are really driven by financials or their own brand. So where do you find out what's important and link that in, that show the link to ROI and the link to their brand? And leadership, we know of the future, is much more about human-centered approach. So we need to create spaces where leaders learn what that is. That means showing up as it, but it means also helping them get away. We've rewarded leaders so much around head work. That's been, making decisions, the thought leadership, strategy, design. And whilst that's still important, what we're seeing now is this real rebalancing around, it's less about head and it's actually more about heart leadership or empathy-led leadership. So courage, vulnerability, grace, generosity, curiosity, resilience, all of those things are what great leaders for today and the future are going to be. So how do we create programs that help them connect with that, get out of their head and get into their heart so that they can lead and demonstrate in that way? And probably the final piece I'd offer here around how do we encourage leaders to be more in that space is feedback as well. The more senior you get, the less feedback often is given. And yet it's probably the time we need it the most. So if you're a leader listening, ask for feedback more, because we don't ask enough. If you're in the people team and the HR partner, offer that feedback regularly, especially that uncomfortable feedback. People need to hear it. Otherwise, sometimes I think we can be complicit in keeping people stuck in behavior that's not helpful. So show up, mirror spaces, create more human-centered approaches and spaces for them to connect, and feedback.
I definitely want to plus one everything you said in terms of really being open to receiving and giving that constructive feedback, and also showing up for your people, demonstrating what it looks like to have vulnerability, ask questions, and really build in that empathy to your day to day. And when we're talking about company culture and the importance of leaders and managers and creating that best in class employee experience is also not only a really nice to have, but it's a need to have in order to have high performers, in order to feel like people can really do their job to the best of their ability as well, promote innovation. What does quote unquote high performance mean at Sony, and how has that really shifted over time, as well as we're talking about kind of the changing nature of the workplace?
It's a really great question. And I think we're just starting to, as I'm sure many organizations are, unpack what does high performance mean now. We may connect it to what it was in the past before, which in the past it was, a lot of collaboration, creativity. We're a creative organization. And so a lot of that was all around how you connect, how you collaborate. And some of that still stays, that's still present for us. But for us, it's really now moving to redefining high performance as one that employees, no matter where they are or who they are in the organization, are engaged. So we see them engagement. We know that drives high performance. They're performing and they're really thriving. So they might be hitting their goals or they're hitting their milestones, but they're also thriving as, again, that human, they're feeling good in themselves. Where we see teams that actively collaborate, rise through challenges, there's shared goals, there's innovation and creativity, and the team is growing, the business is growing. That for us is high performance. And then to underscore it, that it's also really driven by engaged employees that feel safe, have a sense of belonging, and feel valued. And we know that, the bedrock of high performance is psychological safety. So we've really got to start there in looking at all of our teams and all of our spaces and places and say, how do we create psychological safety? What does high performance look like in each department? And how are we looking through that through a lens of making sure we know diverse, high inclusive teams that feel safe and able to share different ideas? We know that's where high performance comes outside of that. So we're still in the unpacking and the discovery. We definitely don't have all the answers, but for us, that's some of the key things that stand out and that we're working towards.
The bedrock of high performance is psychological safety, and it's something that, again, doesn't just happen because you have that intention. You have to create those actions, those non-negotiables as leaders, as teammates, as coworkers as well. We've talked about kind of that ownership mentality around culture and creating a place where you really feel like you belong and can do your best work. How do you really hold folks accountable to create those inclusive and equitable processes no matter where they sit in the company?
Oh, great questions. Love all of these. I think it starts with a belief of, what you measure, you manage. So it starts there. So what are we measuring and how are we measuring it? We've just introduced a new DEI framework I'm super excited by. And within that, there's a template for each leader to get really clear on, commit to and measure the work that they're doing around creating inclusive environments and equitable processes, practices, experiences, etc. How are they diversifying their teams to make sure that all identities are represented? How are they providing different resources based on needs? What are they investing? Where are they investing? How are they demonstrating a mobility mindset? Is everyone's voice included in this project? So there's some simple day-to-day things we can do that's guiding leaders and folks, everyone, because this isn't just on leaders, this is on every one of us, around when we're in project meetings, whose voice is missing from this that we need to include? Who should we be actually centering here? Who needs to zip it a bit more and listen? There are little questions that we can ask ourselves to create more inclusive processes in our day-to-day. We've introduced a team charter for teams to work with and redesign. Actually, how do we communicate in this hybrid world? How do we make sure people aren't left out of conversations, even if they're not physically present? So there are small behaviors and small actions that really make a difference on day to day. And I also think it starts with our leaders seeing this as not just the right thing to do, but a business imperative. And we're really blessed and lucky that our CEO is not just committed to this work in word, but really in action. He holds his leaders accountable. He's tasked every leader to go beyond local demographics with representation, and that really we want to make sure that we're matching all of our artists. And we know behavior breeds behavior. So we're holding everyone accountable and responsible, committed to check-ins. We're putting it in business planning meetings as well as quarterly check-ins. So everyone can make small actions, and then there's bigger actions from all the way up to the top, holding everyone accountable.
Absolutely. Behavior does breed behavior. And also just the questions of how are you doing this on a regular basis? Did you do this quarter? Really asking that question to yourself and others at different points of the employee experience too, right? Because it's not just that you have four key areas. It's ongoing. Someone said this the other day too. Employee experience, people experience is happening whether you're focusing on it or not as well. And that's really important to remember too. I know there's been so many conversations around where we are today in terms of quiet quitting and a potential impending recession and things that are also just external factors as well. So outside of the company too. Has quiet quitting or the great resignation or the potential recession impacted Sony Music Entertainment at all in terms of strategy or how you're thinking about employees?
I mean, we're impacted the same as the best of them for sure. What happens externally no longer doesn't, it penetrates the walls of every organization. So I think, for years, we've always had fairly low attrition. A number of employees have built great long careers here. People love the people and the work here. That's definitely clear. Yet we're absolutely experiencing some people choosing different paths right now. I think some of our approach means we haven't been hit as hard as maybe some folks, but yet you never know what can come around the corner. So we need to be proactive around planning ahead, reducing any negative impact. But really, our focus is around leaning into more flexible and human-centered approaches. And as we believe that that's the way that we want to create the best place for our folks to come here and really thrive as well. Quiet quitting, many people have talked about this. I think it really is just a rebranding for something that has long been talked about and it's been here for a long time. It's around really people creation of boundaries and trying to find some balance between, work and life. It's been studied under different names for decades around disengagement, neglect, withdrawal. There's different ways it's showing up. It's just rebranded right now as quiet quitting. I think, look, when the job market is weak, employees will absolutely put up with a lot more dissatisfaction in the workplace, which we know isn't always a good thing. And when it's strong, it's the opposite of that. And what we're seeing now on the back of coming out of the pandemic and years of different feelings and emotions coming up around so many things is actually a reset and a rebalancing, and people saying, actually, I want something different. And if I can't find it here, maybe I need to go elsewhere. What we want to do is listen a lot more. So actually proactively find out. And so we're regularly doing employee listening to see where can we improve. We know that the number one driver is lack of progress for employees moving on, and we need to feel like we're growing and learning all the time. So that's where we're focusing attention, as well as centering creativity, collaboration, and the well-being of our employees, and looking to always listen and learn. And I think that's something that we all can continue to do more of.
Absolutely. I think that listening and active listening, how are you demonstrating that you're actively listening and following up, is really critical as well to also building trust too, because if you are doing those things, then people are more likely to come back to you with feedback and really trust you as well as an individual and as a leader, as a company. Maria, I know I asked you very specific questions around your journey to this work and all of the things that you are doing today in terms of people experience strategy, but is there anything that I didn't directly ask that you want to share with folks listening, or any key insights you would like to underscore about listening or the innovation that's happening or unlearning there?
I think, we could obviously keep talking for, there's so many different things we could go into. I think my offer to anyone that's listening, and I guess I offer it also to myself, is remember there's not one right answer. And right now there are multiple, and there's multiple shifts and changes that are happening. And those of us that are in the people field, sometimes we can feel overwhelmed. We're humans too. And how are you also putting that mask on that airplane, using that metaphor on ourselves first, and taking care and centering wellness and making sure we're taking care of ourselves so we can keep showing up for others. So I'd offer that. And also keep listening and centering the voices of those that have been most underrepresented and continue to be. Sometimes we all need to unlearn something. And the more you become aware of what that is that I need to unlearn, the greater shifts we're going to make. And then I guess finally give yourself some grace along the journey, because we're going to get things wrong, but that's how we also learn, and that's how we'll find out what is right as we keep evolving and changing. And remember, we didn't think we could do X at one point, and now we are. So, my offer is lean in to people around you, lean back when you need that support, and let's keep leaping forward, because it's going to take all of us making big, brave steps to keep evolving the employee experience to where we know it needs to get to.
Change is literally the only constant. Being able to really adapt and have that open mind and really lean into these conversations, knowing nobody has all of the answers, but also we can do our best to really learn and hold that mirror up to ourselves as well, as hard as it may be too. Maria, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.